I'm Whitney.
I'm Mindy.
And I'm Deb.
We're three best friends who love nerdy things.
Well, some people think we're nerdy, but we think we're pretty awesome.
This is our nerdiest thing.
This season, we are discussing Jennifer L. Armentrout's From Blood and Ash, all of the books in that series, plus the Flesh and Fire series as well. We are spoiler friendly, so listen at your own risk. Hello, fellow nerds, and welcome to our nerdiest thing. Today we are talking about From Blood and Ash, chapters 4 and 5. Before we get into it, Deb, will you please tell us about our nerdiest cocktail?
This week, we are having a take on a lion's tail cocktail, which is a version of a whiskey sour. So if you don't like whiskey sours, which we know that Whitney typically does not like whiskey or bourbon, then don't be scared away by this cocktail, because if you have the Make and Muddle 7 syrup, it has all these wonderful flavors of cinnamon and cardamom and nutmeg in it. And you really can't taste the bourbon with the exception of like just that really lovely fall feel behind it. So
it does taste a lot better than any other bourbon drink that I've had.
Yeah. So
good job, Make and Muddle.
This does have egg white mixture on top. Don't be scared by that. We made ours really frothy. It's very, very delicious. But tonight you're going to put this in a coupe glass and you're going to serve it straight up. So it's 2 ounces of bourbon, an ounce of fresh lemon juice, and an ounce of the Make and Muddle 7 syrup. And then you use egg white or powdered egg white, which you can use if you have a worry about salmonella, which we like to live on the edge. So we did not get powdered egg white. But it's really, really delicious. Nice and refreshing and good for like sitting by the fire.
Mindy, will you spin the wheel o' names for our nerdiest recap?
Let's see.
Is it me again? I hope it is.
Oh, it's me.
Yay.
Yay, Mindy Jet. Take it away.
Let me get the 30-second timer going. Okay. And go.
So Poppy and her guard Victor go to someone's house who has a curse, which means it's basically like a rotting body getting ready to die or become a vampire or whatever. And so they go to give them dignity in death. So they basically kill the guy so he doesn't turn into a creature. Then they meet Agnes, his wife, and she finds out she knows that Poppy's the maiden, and Lord have mercy. Can I do that again?
No, you may not.
I'm really bad at this.
We got through 10 of the 40 pages.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did worse than you, Whitney.
Well, no, it's
and that's saying something.
But at least you knew where you were going, because last time I did the 30-second recap, I like just talked about one chapter, and I was like, "Ooh, I have time left," and you're like, "But you're not done."
I feel like for all of us, it's A for effort, with the recap. We're doing our best.
Quite frankly, it's been a while for me, so it's not like riding a bike.
And if it
takes a little while.
If anyone wants to be honest and try to do this after they've read the chapters each week, go ahead and send us your sound file.
Oh, yeah. That would be fun.
We would love to see if anyone can really do this super duper well. You get really flustered, and 30 seconds is not very long.
Yeah, well, and we could play it. They could do the listener recap. That would be great.
I like that idea.
30 seconds, guys.
Send it in.
No studying.
No reading off your iPad either.
Yeah. Mindy, will you do our nerdiest vocabulary?
I will. So this week I picked Victor as our name for the week. I was going to do a little etymology. We haven't gotten much pronunciation yet, so I don't think we've gotten into things that needed to be pronounced correctly. So I'm just going with the names. And I looked up, of course, Victor's name is spelled differently than what like the common name of Victor is spelled. So I just looked up Victor. Not surprisingly, it means winner or conqueror. Duh. One of the kind of cool little tidbits I found out was it's not necessarily associated with Christianity, but one of the earliest Christian names that they used for several saints and popes was Victor, and it basically symbolized Christ's victory over death.
That makes me think of that hymn.
Sing it, Whitney.
Hymn.
Oh, victory.
For the record, Whitney has this amazing singing voice, and I don't know why you sounded like an 80-year-old woman right then.
Thinking about small. Sorry, I totally derailed vocab. I apologize.
No worries. And of course, I looked up in the Urban Dictionary. So one of them was a very handsome guy, which, starts out pretty normal. And then it goes a little off the rails. Thick as fuck and has a hell of a personality and happens to have a large penis.
Oh, my.
Well, we know there's someone at the Red Pearl that's always up on it.
I know,
I
but
mean-
now I have weird, I don't know what to think of Victor vibes now.
He is handsome.
Do you mean Dictor vibes?
It's headcanon for me now. That
poor
his name is
Victor.
Dictor.
Dictor.
That's what they call him at the Red Pearl.
Don't speak ill of the dead, Mindy.
R.I.P. R.I.P. Victor. Spoiler alert. R.I.P. Victor.
Hey, we warn everyone to read this at least once before
Yeah.
they listen
Well,
to
yes,
this.
this
It
is
is
true.
spoiler heavy.
So the
Poor
next
Mindy. We just keep interrupting your vocab. Hey, Mindy.
Are we ready?
I don't know. Try to talk again.
So the other two are very short and not so sweet, but someone just wrote a motherfucking legend.
Oh.
And I think Poppy might agree with that.
I
I'd say he
feel
is.
like Poppy wrote that.
all Victors are a motherfucking legend.
Yeah.
If you don't know much about them, Mindy, do you want to tell them what a Victor is in case they haven't read like A Shadow in the Ember? You don't remember?
It's going to come out sounding like
All right.
I didn't
Whitney,
prepare for that.
Whitney. She literally looked at me with her mouth clamped shut and was like, no, don't make me say Whitney. Can you tell us what a
man.
Victor is?
A Victor in the Blood and Ash world is a person who is connected with the fates because they have a purpose. An overall purpose of their life is to assist somehow another person who has a very important role in like the history of the world, basically.
And sometimes they know they're a Victor and sometimes they don't.
Right.
And we are led to believe in this instance that this Victor does not know he is a Victor, which is also quite
confusing.
weird, right?
Yeah.
Because like it's called a Victor overall, like victory, like Mindy's thing, but it just so happens in the first book the Victor is called Victor.
Well, he was the first one. They named it after him. He was the very first Victor that the Fates used. And so they named it after him.
Didn't Serafina have a Victor?
Yeah, but Victor was already... Because
gets
Victor's-
reincarnated.
Oh,
yeah,
it's-
Victors
okay,
get
gotcha.
reincarnated. So
Okay.
we actually see
I did
Victor...
remember something.
Yeah, Victor is
Great job.
with the goddess Penelope in Shadow in the Ember.
I think they're doing it.
Oh, definitely.
I think she
It's
and
because
Sir...
he
what's his
has been
face?
to have a large penis.
I think Sir Holland and Penelope are together.
How many names can we take where we can add the word dick to it? Because we got Dictor, Sir. Help me out here. Bolland. I am 8 years old.
Anyway, sorry.
have one more, actually.
Once again, we've interrupted
but
your
it's-
vocab.
I don't think this one's gonna keep us any more.
Well,
on the
that's what you
rails
thought
here.
about the last two.
So the third one I found, they seem to think it is a pet name for a vibrator or sex toy.
Oh, my.
A Dictor.
A dictor. Yeah,
A Victor?
Well, I mean, you do get to victory.
this is true.
I win.
That is...
Something else,
That,
right?
yeah, that's different. See, now I'm going to think about that every time.
Every time you do what?
I always think about my vibrator.
Well, just like the name Victor now, I'm going to be like, did someone name you after a vibrator or does somebody name a vibrator after you?
Whitney
You know,
will never be able to meet somebody named Victor and not think of penises now.
well,
Well, I would say the name Victor though is kind of like Chad. It sounds like a dick. Like sounds like you're a
Yeah.
piece of shit.
it makes
Sorry,
it
any
makes me
listeners
think
named
of
Victor.
like early 1900s wealthy dude.
Well, hello, Victor.
Yeah, that's what it makes me think of.
Stop putting your hand up your skirt or my skirt without asking.
That's a totally different kind of Victor.
Yeah.
No, sir, I don't like it.
Oh, goodness. Well, thank you, Mindy. And you know what? You persevered in the face of me and Deb
In the face
throwing
of
you
dicks.
off. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
No apologies necessary.
So let's get into chapter 4. At the end of chapter 3, Victor comes to Poppy's room and says, there's a curse. Let's go help, right? And so they leave through the old servant's exit, which is how Poppy sneaks in and out of the castle because basically nobody but her and Victor know that that entrance is even there. So I actually wrote down, so do the Tiermans really not know about it? Or is it like a fate thing?
I feel like the Tiermans know most of what Poppy's actually doing.
Oh, you think so?
I do, because, I mean, she's lived these people have lived for hundreds of years. There's no way they don't know about a servant's entrance off of that room.
Yes, but they are also sort of self-centered, and you got to think about the divide between the haves and the have-nots, and I bet they could care less with where the servants
what
go.
that room
is
there access to. That's a good point.
I
just feel like she sneaks out too much and does so much shit that they've got to sometimes be like, oh, fuck it, I don't want to talk to her about it again.
Well, one thing that we learn that seems to be a pattern for Ascended, including the Tiermans, throughout these books is that they just ignore things that need to be addressed, and that happens a lot with, like, there's a hole in the rise, and that's how, like, Kieran and Hawk sneak in different towns. Or there's all these trees that are, was it the Jacaranda trees? Which,
is that how you pronounce it?
Okay, I was just about to say the only reason I know how to pronounce that is because of Encanto.
That's going to be part of our Nerdiest vocabulary.
Yeah,
I think next week, isn't it? Because Rylan,
probably, yeah.
The hurricane of Jacaranda.
There's
That's
your
how it
singing
goes.
voice. Now sing it like that person's mom.
Hurricane. Oh, man. Anyway, so I wrote that down, though, like, is that kind of what you're saying, Mindy? Is that evidence of their arrogance and kind of laziness and self-centeredness? So. Or is it like they genuinely don't know about this and that's because the fates made it so that Poppy could go out and eventually go to the Red Pearl and meet Hawk, right? Like, I just thought that was, I don't think I've ever thought about that before. It was just a curious question.
Can I ask a question? Because they go to this person's house and there's a white handkerchief hanging from the door. Mm-hmm. And they start talking about dignity and death, because we find out in this chapter that if you start showing signs of being cursed, which is a craven, that they will take you to the town square and burn you alive in front of everyone.
Yeah.
And it's treasonous to not. Do we know why that's treasonous, to not let someone just die with dignity?
I think that it's because the Craven are blamed on Atlanteans, but they're actually from Ascended. So I think that they're afraid that if they don't immediately find and dispose of these people that are turning into Cravens, they might be able to point back to an Ascended somehow.
But we also know that they use the Craven as fear-mongering to keep people in line.
That's true too.
Like, I think they do that because it's a public display and they want everybody to stay in line.
Look at how much we protect you.
Yeah.
We burn these people alive. But, like, also there is something about, like, well, so-and-so's dad got cursed and the Duchess went to their house and, let them die peacefully. Like, that also says a lot as a leader, but that's just not the types of leaders that these people are.
Right. They would never think about it in that way. Yeah. I did think that I was thinking about the Flesh and Fire books with this whole idea of, like, dignity in death. And I was thinking that whole idea seems like it stems from Nyktos in the prequel books. Like, he is the god of the primal of death, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it just seems like that whole idea of, like, there should be dignity in death, and, like, death doesn't have to be this horrible thing for everybody.
Kind of born
like
into Poppy, you mean?
Yeah, like that seems to be something that Nyktos believes, but that other primals do not believe that.
Well, and depending on how far you as a listener into the series, we do find out that Nyktos is Poppy's, like, great grandfather. Oh,
just grandfather.
Oh, okay. He is her grandfather.
Yeah, just grandfather.
Sorry, I forget there's so many more years in between those.
It does.
Well, there are.
I know, but
he's only her grandfather.
Okay.
because they live that long.
Right, because they live that long.
Right.
Exactly.
And so you learn that. And so he is the primal of death in Shadow and Ember and the Light and the Flame.
Mm-hmm.
But we know he is actually supposed to be the primal of life.
Yeah. And the other thing I've thought, like, that sounds like Nyktos, is, her gift of sensing emotions, reading emotions, whatever. Like, Nyktos has that ability, right? So she that is born in her, right?
Yeah,
or she is
think
born
that
with
was
that.
Intentional.
Yeah, but it's a burden to her, and it's something that she struggles with that, like, makes things difficult for her, but she uses it to help other people. That also feels very much to me like a Nyktos and Seraphina thing, right?
So this is the problem with having a nerdy mom if you're a teenager. Like, I think about, like, I read these chapters and then I always think about them a little bit before I go in and do, like, my deep dive research and everything. And so I just randomly look at my daughter in the car today and I go, so if you could read everyone's mind, would during, like, the down times when they're not really thinking about stuff, is it just gibberish and nonstop songs stuck in someone's head? Because that would be horrible. Because, like, I forget what song was stuck in my head today, but I'm like, if someone's listening, this is pure insanity for them.
Yeah, that would be somebody's. That would make them crazy to have to listen to my thoughts, I feel like.
Right. They'd be like, damn, she's fucked up. Also, stop singing that song in your head for the love of God.
They would be like, oh, the daddy issues. She talks a little bit about her dagger, which she already described in the first chapter as being a woven bone handle and a bloodstone blade. But in this chapter, she talks about it a little bit more about how bloodstone kills Craven. Like, that's why she has that dagger, so that she can use it to protect herself generally, but also help these people that are going to turn into cravens if she doesn't help them. And I keep, every time that dagger gets brought up, I keep thinking, because we know by the end of War of Two Queens that the woven bone dagger that she has was made fairly recently, within the last, like, 100 years or 50 years, with the bones of Castile's brothers bonded woven.
Which was Delano's sister.
Delano's sister.
Right.
And King Jalara made like 6 or 7 of those daggers and somehow went from King Jalara to Victor because Victor gave the dagger to Poppy. I just always wonder what was the chain of, what am I trying to say? The chain of custody with that dagger, right? Like, how did it get from Jalara in Carcedonia, which is the capital, across the country into Macedonia to Victor to give to Poppy?
That's a phase.
But
it has to be. I want to know where the other daggers are, though.
Yeah, well, because in book 4, War of Two Queens,
Malik.
Ugh,
can't even.
I'm just gonna say brother Bear said, I know where all of those, like, I saw them all get made. I know what happened to them, except for one, but now I figured out what happened to it. Like, Poppy has it. So I'm with you. I need more information about that.
So for the record, the brother is Malik, and we've talked about this before, but I always have to think about it. And according to the audiobooks, we know that audio and what JLA says and what we say does not match.
That in the books, whatever they say in the audio.
Yeah,
also.
so the audio says the brother is Malik, and then the dad is Malek.
Yeah, well,
I'm
he's
definitely going to say it wrong about 1,000 times.
He's not their dad, though.
Well, yeah, the
Old
father
king.
figure. Yeah, the old king is
king.
Malek. Right,
Yeah.
right? What did I just say?
Yeah, you're
No, I'm confused.
Dude, I don't even know.
Malik, yeah,
Honestly.
there's a Malik and Malek. Malik is Castile's brother. Malek is the previous king.
So there's no Malik.
No.
But in my mind, there is. I know. It's going to be very difficult
This
for
is
me.
brand new information.
I will say I'm fairly certain in the pronunciation guide that there is a Malik, and I think that's where you got it from. But if I'm going just based off the audio narration,
I think the book
It's too complicated.
verifies what you're saying about the audio. Because I remember thinking, I was being very confused when I saw that because I thought they were interchanged. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
Maybe one could have been Bob and one could have been Dan. Why do you have to make them so close to each other?
I know.
I think it's because we're supposed to think Castiel's mom, Queen Iloana, she does say that she named him after the previous king, which is her ex-husband who cheated on her.
Yeah.
Right.
Who she loved
With the
/
Blood
loves.
Queen. Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, can you imagine, though, looking at your current husband and being like, I'm going to name him pretty close to the guy that cheated on me?
I just can't even.
Yeah, no,
Makes me wonder if
not
Queen,
okay.
That's
Queen
crazy.
Iloana is all good.
Well, that could be a whole bonus episode talking
Yeah.
about
Yes, it could.
talking about her. So before they actually get to the house with the white handkerchief where they need the help with the cursed, I just thought there were a lot of things that Poppy thinks that, first of all, I thought were funny, fun foreshadowing, and also just proof of how much she has worked to overcome all of the trauma from her childhood of like watching her parents get attacked and all, and herself being attacked and everything. She talks about how when she goes to help these cursed people that they think that she's a child of the gods, and she's like, I'm definitely not a child of the gods, which I just thought was really funny because
I underlined that too because I was like, but you are.
you literally are. Yeah. You just don't know it yet.
Not even great, just
Right,
two generations.
Right. And she says about grief, the grief would always linger, a ghost that would haunt every happy moment in her life until it became all she knew. And I marked that and said, I feel like Poppy has worked really hard to not be overcome with grief like this. And I think that Victor is a huge part of that for her. She's able to have happy moments partly because of her relationship with him.
So in this chapter, we do, in the part that you're talking about, she has met the wife of this man that's been cursed. Her name is Agnes. And it says that her grief is so overpowering, it's almost like death. And so
It's painful.
Right. One question I had for the both of you is when Poppy goes to kind of calm down someone's grief, essentially, she thinks of happy things. And in this one, it's a sea and the beach. So if you had this power, what would your happy moment be?
For me, I would probably, and I always use this one when I do the visualizations or anything like that with meditation. I go back to when I was in college. I took a trip to Colorado, which is my absolute favorite state to visit. I almost lived there. I probably would live there if I was given the opportunity. But I love mountains and rocks. I don't know. There's something about those that just feel very majestic to me. And we went to go visit the Garden of the Gods, and I spent probably a good 45 minutes just sitting on the rocks and looking. And I don't know, it was very peaceful and centering. And I always go back to that when I need that kind of feeling.
That's great. What about
That's
you, Whit?
really nice. I don't know that I have a specific moment. I would probably pick something with Robbie because I like him.
Well, she does in this chapter say that she thinks of Hawk.
I know.
Cracked me up, actually.
Right.
I was
I
like, okay,
loved
but then
that.
when the guy's dying, she thinks about her time with Hawk.
Right.
I
She's like,
know.
well, I made out with that guy that one time.
Do you think that he, like, while he was, like, having his emotions calmed down, do you think he was thinking sexy thoughts?
Was he horny?
No, I don't
It's like,
think.
is it weird that I have an erection right now?
See, I didn't read it like that at all. I just read it like she felt very safe and she felt, I mean, happy is not really the right word, but she felt some happiness at having somebody be attracted to her, right? Because
yeah.
not necessarily like a sexy time kind of
Well, I
feeling,
can't
but
think
maybe
of Hawk
that
without
too.
thinking of sexy
I know.
time.
Well, neither can he. So
I mean, he did just walk up to her and take his shirt off.
what would your happy thought be, Deb?
So part of the sleep therapy that I just did, if you've listened to previous episodes, I did like sleep training to get over my insomnia. And it would, when I go to read in the evenings, I usually lay in a dark room and I turn on ambient noise because if I don't drown out noise, I can't calm down. So I turn on a rain sound effect. Sometimes, depending on my mood, it's a light storm. Sometimes it's a really deep storm, but there's always running water behind it, either the ocean or the river. So I really always, I'm a swimmer. I love to be in the water. I'm a summer girl and it calms me down. So on those nights that maybe like, if I'm like too anxious, listening to a storm isn't the best thing in the world. And this particular ambient app, just the rain sound, it fades out and fades back in. So it always distracts me. And these other ones don't. They're
Yeah.
a little bit more seamless. But on those nights, I'll just listen to the river ambient sound. So that's what it is for me.
I wanted to talk a little bit about Jennifer L. Armentrout's use of figurative language and how she really personifies emotions, like gives them basically human characteristics and makes you feel like you're actually interacting with these instead of just keeping them inside. And I pulled a few quotes that I think really resonated with that idea. And it just reading them makes me feel like I could touch that pain. She starts out by saying there's a soul-deep pain that radiated from her in waves I couldn't see, but it was so heavy it was almost a tangible entity surrounding her. So that's what it all starts out with, that it's like this thing in the room. She could feel it slicing through my cloak and clothing and scraping against my skin like rusty, icy nails. Can you feel that? Like when I read that, like it gives me chills.
You can. And we talked last episode that part of the reason we are so attracted to that red pearl scene is she really knows how to describe sexual feeling.
Yeah.
I don't know how she does this so well, but she does make you in the moment. Like you feel uncomfortable while you're reading this.
Her sense of imagery is just so powerful. The next thing she says is when Agnes's grief formed iron shackles around my ankles, weighing me down as it tightened around my neck. Emotion clogged my throat, tasting like bitter desperation and sour hopelessness. She like pulled every single sense into that. Touch, feel, taste, like it gives me goosebumps. Just a few more. The woman's grief painted the walls and floors in oily black. Her pain had gathered here among the knickknacks and clay plates, quilted blankets with frayed edges, and tired furniture. So basically, her pain's hanging out on the furniture.
Well,
right?
have you not ever walked into a room, though, and been like, whoa, what is happening in here? Not even if, like, no one's standing in there, their backs to you, you can feel it.
Well, it's like when somebody, I've used this phrase all the time, when you walk in and, like, you could cut the tension with a knife.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, that's how it
and
feels.
And there's visually nothing there. So what is it actually? Like, does everybody have a little bit of a sense of someone else's emotions or what is
Maybe.
that?
I think sometimes if you have any level of empathy, then yeah, you can sense stuff like that. I really liked the shackle one that you were just saying, Mindy, because I feel like that's a description of what grief feels like when you are experiencing grief, right? Like it weighs you down and it feels like
you're being chained to it.
It can feel like you're drowning, and I love that description too.
I just think that she really is brilliant with the way she uses words. And then she talks about when she's in there with Marlowe, the cursed, she talks about his anguish that left no room for light, and it went beyond suffocating. It choked and clawed in the knowledge that there was no way out of this. Again, like talk about like your feelings of desperation. Like as I'm still getting chills as I'm reading these, because to me, she just describes it so poetically and gives it this body, this sort of, I don't know, just...
Well, even when Poppy uses her gift on Agnes says, I feel like I can breathe again. And have you ever been so relieved that you're like, oh my gosh, I can take a deep breath for the first time in days? And then with Marlowe, when she goes in, when she starts using his gift, his eyes stop fluttering so much. She uses that breathing again, right? He's able to take a deep breath instead of short, shallow breaths. Yeah. And he's able to stop and actually look at her instead of being antsy. And so it really does paint a picture of what her gift can do for someone. Can she like come around when I'm having a really anxious day?
I know, right?
I feel like she needs to be my like nurse.
She'll be like, Deb, everything's okay. Let me just, play with your hair for a minute. We'll be fine.
And think about Hawk for a second.
Yeah.
I'm like, why don't you tell me about him?
Yeah, I loved that Hawk is already one of her happiest memories. Like
it really was sweet.
But it also makes me sad that she's 19 and one encounter with this guard. We talked last time about how she and the Duchess would watch his oil-slicked arms. One time with this guy that she's kind of watched work out is her happy moment. It just shows how shitty her life is.
Yes, and like how sheltered she is and how isolated they have made her from all types of relationships like we talked about before.
And I mean, it shows like the basic human needs that you have, right? Shelter, water, food, don't cover your emotional needs, because it would be, I think that people look at her and they're like, well, she has everything she needs. Like, why would she be unhappy? And, you know, Tawny doesn't understand why she's scared of the ascension. And we even have in this chapter, Victor's like, are you trying to make yourself unworthy? Is that the thing here? And we find out she is
100%. Yeah.
And he's like, I don't understand what the problem is. And she's like, well, no one has fucking told me what's going to happen to me. And I don't really want to be responsible for all of these people. I never signed up for this.
Yeah.
And I'm locked in a room all the time. 4 people have seen my face.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Well, and she shows Marlowe her face. And it made me so sad because she goes straight to the Duke and the horrible things that he has said to her so many times about the way that she looks. And she's doing this amazing thing for this man and his family and still is thinking about, he probably thinks that I'm horribly ugly too. He probably thinks that I'm a tragedy. You know, like we talked about in the last episode about how she's taken out of the moment with Hawk because of her self-consciousness about her scars and the way that she looks. And it's happening here too in a completely different situation, but it's the same, getting taken out of the moment of this wonderful thing she's doing because of what some douchebag told her.
Do you know what the scars are the equivalent of for me is stretch marks? And
yeah, me too.
Almost everyone has stretch marks, especially women. And I've had stretch marks on my inner thigh since puberty because of like from growing so fast. And I'm only 5'2", but I did grow fast at one point for like a month. And, you know, then if you have children, you get them. If you gain weight or really even lose weight rapidly, you can get them. And I have to remind myself sometimes, like, they are a part of my journey. And it's really hard when there's scars from trauma like that to think of it as part of your journey. But I think the reason Hawk finds them so fascinating and beautiful is it shows what she has survived. And instead, the Duke is like, well, someone fucked up your face. That's too bad.
Yeah. He sucks.
One of the beautiful things, though, about that moment when she reveals herself to Marlowe that I really loved is it's really, if you think about it, one of the very few things she can do to maintain control over her own narrative. You know, like they make her cover herself. They make her do all these things. And this is one like private moment where she can take control of that. And she's like, I'm going to show my face to somebody. And we find out later too, that that's part of the reason that she really hates this idea of the ascension is because it's not her choice.
Right. She says a million times in this chapter, because I started underlining it, I just wanted my choice. I just wanted to be my choice. And she even says, like, essentially, maybe I would have chosen to do that if they had said, like, you've got this really great opportunity. Maybe I would have said yes, and then it wouldn't feel so scary. Right. But if she asks questions, it's sacrilege. And it's because they don't have answers for her.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, it's because it's made up.
Right. It's a house of cards. If you start asking questions, it's just going to completely fall. I did have a question in this section. I don't know if there is an answer or if I'm just forgetting. I don't know. But she was talking about how to kill a craven, and the bloodstone dagger blade is one way to do it. And she talks about like basically a stake from a tree from the blood forest will kill a craven. And we find out later, I think, that the Duke is using a cane made from wood from a blood forest tree when he beats Poppy, right? And so my question is, we find out in Book 4, The War of Two Queens, that the blood forest exists because there is a god entombed in that area. And when a god is entombed or sleeping, whatever, the trees turn red like that. So does that mean...
Or when a god spills blood.
Yes, right. So does that mean that there is like that god's power in the trees?
I mean, you would think so. That's a really good call out, because if they're turning the leaves red, something of their essence is going into those trees. And we know later with the primal mist that Poppy can do a lot with that, right?
I mean, it has to be, because any old tree.
Right.
Not, I mean, because it's that special, because the blood forest is what it is.
Right.
Like the reason it is that, I mean, it kind of has to be, right?
Here's something to think about, though. And this is a big thing in Fae and elf literature is iron, right? Is that it will burn their skin and it can keep them captive. So if he's using that type of wood cane to hit her, wouldn't it burn his skin? Wouldn't you think it would be painful for him? But
See,
we know he kind of gets off on pain, so I wonder if he likes it.
See, that's where I wonder about that. First of all, like, if it affects a craven to kill them, does it affect other people too? And I also wonder, why does Duke Tierman use that cane specifically on Poppy? Like, does he know what the blood forest is and why it is a blood forest? And you know what I mean?
I feel like that the Duke and Duchess do know everything. And so I wonder if it's kind of just desserts for him to be beating her with a cane that is essentially influenced by someone.
Isbeth / Ileana doesn't know that her ex is in the blood forest.
But they know someone's there.
I don't think they do.
Oh, okay.
I think only Eloana and Willa are the ones that know.
So I wonder then if it's a pain thing, if it's that
Right.
sadomasochism of him hitting her with something that also hurts him a little bit. Because if it hurts the craven, it's got to hurt an ascended.
That's what, and I don't understand, like, you know, that's her uncle in the blood forest, right? That's making the trees like that. And if the Duke doesn't know that, okay, it would make sense that he wouldn't know that. But then I'm like, okay, so all these fates or whatever that are, you know, trying to help orchestrate these things and letting all these things happen, like, I feel like that would be super sacrilege to a god to allow their, like, blood forest wood or whatever. That sounds really dirty.
Blood forest wood. There is someone
what
that
I'm
gets
saying,
wood
though?
in the
Like-
blood forest later in this book.
So the
What was that? It sounded like you were choking on it.
so was Poppy.
Not in the forest. she
Sorry,
wasn't.
well, that's true. But no, I just feel like the fates would know that, you know, the god in the blood forest is the son of.
But wouldn't
You know
the
what I
god
mean?
want there to be something to combat this type of evil?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm confused
And
by
this
it
isn't
all.
this isn't the only vampire fiction that uses wood from a specific tree. They also do that in the Vampire Diaries series. It's like a white oak tree they use arrows from, which again, I hate to say this about any book. Those books are garbage, but the show's amazing. It's like, I think honestly the author didn't have a very good editor. I think that's what it boils down to. But they use white oak ash or something.
I can't remember what it is,
Yeah,
but
but it's the same type of idea that there's a special tree that can kill them. And it does make me wonder if all of the arrows that they have, because in a couple of chapters, Poppy is on the top of the rise.
That's true.
I wonder if all the arrows are made out of that, because they'd have to be.
They would have to be, right?
To have any kind of effect. they'd
That's
have to be.
interesting. I don't think I've ever thought about that. That's a good catch, Deb. Good job.
Good catch for you too.
I did really enjoy this quick exchange between Victor and Poppy when she is like, get off my case, I can defend myself. She says, I can take care of myself. And he says, but that doesn't mean that you always have to.
Yeah.
I loved that because
That's such a fatherly thing to
that
say.
is. And it's also something that Hawk and Kieran come to believe about her too, right? Like, we know that you can take care of yourself, but we want you to be safe. We love you. We care about you. I really loved that with Victor.
Can we talk a little bit about her description of the Craven? Because it's the same thing we've talked about before with this book and the Sarah J. Maas books about how she doesn't just come out and say, he looked like this and he looked like this. She does it a little bit more in this, but it's really spread out. And so I started noticing all of this description. So cheeks were sunken in as if his stomach hadn't been full in weeks. His eyelids spasmed. His lips were more blue than pink. It says, his wound seeped blood and something darker, oilier, and faint reddish blue lines radiated out from the bite. Like, you can feel the infection. The blood was so much it was streaking his teeth, and his teeth were already changing into sharp points. His nails had lengthened, and they were so sharp that they were more animalistic than mortal. And it says within the hour, his teeth and nails would harden and sharpen even more. And then it says, driven by an insatiable hunger for blood, he would slaughter everyone in sight. It just really gives you an idea of what this person actually looks like right now. Like, they haven't even changed, and they hardly look human anymore.
Right.
And one thing that I forgot when I was rereading this chapter, that they, if you've read these books, you know that the Blood Queen has really created this narrative of what the Craven are and what the Ascended are, and the Atlanteans are the bad guys. And I forgot that she has told people that the Dark One can control the Craven.
Right.
Yeah.
Whenever actually it's the Ascended feeding on people
Right.
and not changing them.
Right.
But she has, to create this narrative of Atlantia being the horrible thing, she says that they're always sent by the Atlanteans.
Yeah.
But we also know the Dark One is not Castile. It's Malik.
Well, for Poppy it is.
Right.
Yeah. But for everybody else, it's Castile.
Yeah.
Yeah. Poppy has a lot to say about Marlowe, and basically like, he waited too long. This is so dangerous. You know, once he turns, if we hadn't gotten here in time, this would have been such a horrible thing. And I wrote down, why is she so mature? Because she says, I didn't have to agree with his actions to understand him, to understand them. And I was just like, I am super judgmental of stuff like that when I'm like, you are making the wrong choice. You are doing this the wrong way. And she's
Especially
not
when they know what the consequences are.
right.
But it also says several times that instinctually they can't hurt themselves when they get to this point.
I thought that was really interesting too, because she explains that as, you know, whatever's in the blood of an Atlantean, therefore in the blood of a Craven, gives them this like primal instinct of survival. And then I was like, okay, but we know that it's not Atlanteans that are making the Craven, it's the Ascended. And so their blood is the thing that has that survival instinct.
I want to talk a little bit more about vampires, but first I want to take a quick break to refill my cocktail. And then in Kentucky where we live, there was a huge windstorm and I haven't had power for... it'll be day 4. So I'm at Whitney's podcasting. We brought all of our equipment over here. And so we thought we would have her very non-bookish, non-nerdy, super sweet, cute husband come down and tell us what he knows about vampires before I go into my section. So we'll be right back.
You're in for a treat.
Craft cocktails don't have to be fussy or ingredient heavy. Make and Muddle is here so that you can have a delicious 3-ingredient cocktail every time. Spend more time reading and less time mixing. Make and Muddle. Cocktail evangelists here to spread the good news about booze.
Whitney's husband is probably the least nerdy and least fantasy book reading person I've ever met in my entire life. But he does get really excited about bread. So I do have to say that out loud.
And chocolate.
And chocolate. So we wanted to pull Robbie in since we had to kind of change up our podcasting schedule tonight and just find out what he knows about vampires, since that's what this book is about. So Robbie, can you tell us, just give us a quick overview of what you know about vampire lore and fiction?
So my lore is based on the Twilight Saga. I'm a supportive husband, so I've seen all the
You're
Twilights.
supportive of Twilight for reasons that we know of. We know what those do to Whitney. Everything you learned about vampires, you learned from Twilight.
Yeah, so that's, or Tom Cruise movie from like...
Oh, Interview with the
Brad
Vampire.
Pitt. Yeah.
That's a
So
classic.
That's about it. That
Okay.
or like, is there one in the Addams Family?
A vampire? I don't know. I don't think so. Tell us the rules of vampirism. Like, what do you know about them? They can live forever. Tell us how they die. Tell us what their weaknesses are.
Sunlight, right? Bella from Twilight. That's a weakness, right?
She's Edward's weakness, yes.
Yeah.
The smell of her blood. It's captivating. How do they die?
I guess they rip their arms off, right? Or their head. No, they rip their heads off. Yeah.
Well, anything will die if you rip their head off, right? So do you think, because we talk a lot on this podcast about age gap romances, right? And we think it's super gross whenever a girl is like 19 and she's dating a 50-year-old. But do you see a problem with the girl being 19 dating a 500-year-old?
What does he look like?
He looks like he's in his mid-20s.
I don't know, honestly. That's a...
I don't know what his balls look like, so I mean, that could...
Me neither.
Right?
You don't know Whitney, right?
Well, she knows about the 50-year-old guy, not the 500-year-old guy. Okay, so what is your favorite moment from Twilight?
I'm not going to say what.
You have to.
Is it when they do it?
No. It's when we do it, right?
That's always your favorite part. You're bright red. It's so sweet.
Oh, I just took a shower, too, so I'm very hot.
Okay, Robbie, thank you for being on our podcast.
Thank
and
you.
enlightening us in the Twilight Saga. I wanted to talk a little bit about the standard rules of vampires that most people know, then a little bit about what we know about the Ascended, and then just some pop cultural references of things that deviate from this normal within books and movies. So a lot of my information comes from sci-fi.com and ghoulsmagazine.com, which I kind of want to subscribe to. It sounds really
I didn't
fun.
know that was a thing.
I know, right? Okay, so standard rules for vampires. Number one that we know, they cannot go into daylight. They must sleep in a coffin or some sort of consecrated ground. They don't age, breathe, or procreate. Most vampire lore, they cannot see their reflections, and a lot of people say that's just because they don't have a soul. Like, you wouldn't have a reflection if you didn't have a soul. I don't know why. Okay, I thought you were about to tell me why.
No, that doesn't make
for real,
sense.
I feel like the reflection's the mirror, not the person.
Right. So we also know that they must drink blood to survive and have protruding fangs. They have a weakness to silver and an aversion to garlic. We know to change someone into a vampire, you have to bite them to make them the new host, and then they need to drink the vampire's blood, usually once you've drained their body dry, but that's not all vampire lore. We also know that they can be killed with a stake in the heart, by decapitation, or by fire, but let's face it, that kills just about anything. Like, if you burn something, it's probably going to die. So most vampires have to be invited into your home, and they can also compel humans to do their bidding. Vampires can survive on animal blood, but it's supposed to taste like shit. And then most vampire lore, they possess some sort of superhuman strength and like healing abilities, right? So we know so far about the Ascended in these books is that they may or may not have a soul. We talked about that a little bit last time. We know that the first Vampire was, and Whitney, please tell me if I'm wrong about this, was created by Ileana and Malek when he ascended her when she died, right? She was the first one.
No. Everybody thinks that she is the first one.
Who is it?
But it's whoever... I don't know that we know specifically who the first one is, because when he ascended Isbeth, other people started ascending other people.
And for the record, Ileana and Isbeth are the same person.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we know that the Ascended have black, soulless eyes. And we also know to become an Ascended, you have to have the blood of an Atlantean to turn. So if an Ascended bites you and you don't drink Atlantean blood, that's how you turn into a Craven. The second sons and daughters of everyone living in Solus, they are all set to become vampires during Poppy's ascension next year. The third sons and daughters, we don't find out until the fourth book, which is The War of Two Queens. They are told for years and years that they're given to the gods, but they're actually fed to the vampires as food. And so then they also, we talked about this a little bit, that they use the Craven as a fear device to keep people in Solus under control. They say, like, you know, we displease the gods, so now there's this mist with the Craven in it, and they're going to come eat you. But it's really because an Ascended could not fight their bloodlust. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so a couple of deviation from the typical vampire roles. So the first one I talked about was Twilight, because it's the first one I thought of, and that they fucking glitter in the sunshine. And I remember watching the movie the first time.
This is the skin of a killer, Bella.
Is it? And I remember the very first time I watched that movie, there's that glittery sound effect. It's the only way I can explain it. And I was like, why?
It's like wind chimes, kind of.
It is like wind chimes.
Okay, so I didn't know this. There is a vampire queen in the cartoon Adventure Time. And she does not drink blood, but she does need to suck the color red from things, which I found really funny.
That's actually kind of cool.
In the movie The Strain, vampirism is spread by parasitic worms. And so what happens once you get this worm into you is you do become a vampire, but it makes your dick fall off. I mean, they're like, well, I guess we're not going to need those anymore. We do know in this book that the Ascended still can have sex. And we're going to talk more about Lord Mazeen in a few minutes and his bullshit. So there is also a children's book. And Mindy, maybe you've heard of this, called Bunnicula.
Yeah.
So the
Vampire bunny.
Yeah, he's a vampire bunny. He doesn't drink blood, but he does suck vegetable juice out of the vegetables with his cute little fangs,
Yeah.
which I thought was really fun.
He's actually kind of cute.
Is he? In the movie Daybreak, it has Ethan Hawke in it. And if you've not seen it, it was actually a really good vampire movie that nobody talked about. So in that movie, vampirism is a virus, and the vampires essentially turn into craven when there's not enough to eat. So vampires have started to take over the world, and there aren't enough humans to eat, so they start to turn into these bloodlust, craven, like soulless types of things. And what this, like all good vampire fiction, Ethan Hawke just happens to also be a researcher. And he cures vampirism by sun exposure therapy, which I think was... I think that's really, really cool. And then in the Sookie Stackhouse vampire series, if you've not read that, they've actually invented a blood substitute. That's what True Blood is, if you've watched the show True Blood.
Oh.
In medieval times, I thought this was really funny, especially because of Poppy's hair. In medieval times, all redheads were assumed to be vampires. So can you imagine like birthing a redhead and being like, oh, fuck, I just gave birth to a vampire.
So everyone was terrified of Ireland.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So we know in the From Blood and Ash world that a vampire bite can be orgasmic or painful depending on what the biter wants you to feel.
Yeah.
And there aren't very many other authors that use that as a plot device, but I do think that they use it really well in the series. In the 1985 movie Life Force, we find out that vampires actually come from an alien spacecraft, and they start infecting people.
Okay, that's so funny. That reminds me of the book that I read. I think I mistakenly talked about it at one of our book clubs, and it wasn't the book that we were talking about. It was called The Southern Guide.
The Southern
The
Vampires
Southern Book Club's
Guide
to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix, and they have a more alien-like quality.
Really?
Well, he does. It's just one guy, but he's got like this long, like tongue-like thing that like comes out, and that's how he gets blood from you.
It's funny that you say that, because in that lore where it makes their dick fall off, they have like a long tongue like that too.
That seems very similar.
Yeah.
His dick didn't fall off.
Oh, that's
unfortunately.
So in 2019's What We Do in the Shadows, this was a television show. I don't know what network it was on.
It's an FX show. I watch it and it's hilarious.
Is it supposed to be funny?
Oh yeah, it's a comedy. It's
I'll have to watch
hilarious.
it. Okay, so there is a vampire, and now this is making more sense. There's a vampire that has human characteristics, but sucks the life force out of everyone in his workday by being the most boring and frustrating person to work with.
I highly recommend it. It is so funny. You guys would enjoy
I'll have
it.
to look it up. Okay, so then there was a movie in 2013, and I don't know if I'm saying this right, but it's NOS 4A2. That Nosferatu. Yeah, okay. But it's NOS 4A2. I just had to say that out loud. There's a vampire that sucks the life force from children by driving them around in his car.
What?
Which sounds like the most boring shit I've ever heard in my entire life. So, last but not least, we know in the Twilight movies and the Vampire Chronicles, which is what Robbie talked about, the Interview of the Vampire series, which is written by Anne Rice and one of my favorite series. I've said before on this podcast, it got me back into reading as a teenager. It's forbidden to make vampires that are children because they're so reckless and compulsive, just like human children are. So I really loved researching this because her ascended vampires, and when I say her, I mean Jennifer Armentrout, are really different than a lot of vampires in lore. But I love seeing that I had 12 different examples of how other creators have deviated from this vampire lore. And just so everyone knows, a lot of vampire lore is stemmed from the demon Lilith, which was the first demon that Lucifer created. And they said that's how vampires were created. But who the fuck knows?
What I thought was something that I'd forgotten actually, was that the Ascendant's eyes were black. And that always reminds me of demons from like Supernatural.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, with most vampire lore starts with some sort of demon. Yeah. So I wonder if that was a subconscious decision by Jennifer Armentrout, or if it's something that she was really interested in as a writer.
Well, and demons are... Poppy feels like the Ascended are perhaps soulless, but demons are not soulless. They're corrupted souls, right? Like, isn't that the idea of a demon?
Well, they're possessed souls. So, yeah, I guess that would be
So, do you realize that they live in a city called Soulless?
Yeah.
I never put that together.
Yes, but I also know from teasers for the next Flesh and Fire book, Flesh and Fire or Fire and Flesh? Flesh and Fire.
Flesh and Fire.
For the third book, there was a teaser that word is somehow connected to Coelus, the primal of
Coelus and soulless.
right. Like, well, I can't remember exactly
what
the
he's soulless,
teasers.
though?
Well, I mean, maybe, but he uses that word in a
just
teaser.
sounds like a colonoscopy brand.
Coelus.
It does.
Now available at over the counter.
So after Poppy and Victor leave Agnes's house and leave Ridley's house to make sure that they have not turned anybody else, they walk through the Wisher's Grove, which I tried to look up, and it is literally only mentioned this one time in this one book in the entire series. It's their way to sneak back into the castle because everybody thinks it's haunted, which I thought was kind of funny. So everybody stays away from it. And that's when they have this conversation that, Deb, I think you were talking about earlier, where Victor is basically like, you are breaking a lot of rules. You're doing all this stuff. You know, you're showing your face to these cursed people. You're taking these risks. And I don't understand why you're doing it, because, you know, the Duke is always on your case about everything that doesn't really matter. You get in trouble for stupid stuff. So why are you doing all this bigger stuff that you could get in a lot of trouble for? Like, don't do this to yourself.
Isn't it the same though as like when you were in high school and you broke curfew and you're like, well, I already broke curfew, so I might as well just stay out for 4 more hours because I'm going to get in trouble anyway.
Yep.
I think that's how she feels. Like, no matter what she does, she knows that the Duke wants to quote unquote punish her.
Right.
And
it doesn't matter.
She should just do whatever she wants.
Right. And ultimately, in that situation, she's 100% right. The Duke is going to find whatever reason to punish her, no matter what she does. So she might as well get some joy out of her life. But I thought it was interesting because earlier, Deb, you said something that I didn't read it that way, where you were talking about Victor and Poppy's conversation here. And that basically, I don't know, like the way that you read the conversation with Victor, from Victor's point of view, I guess, is more like aggressive maybe, or standoffish with her. And I didn't read it like that. I read it more like, I see that this is what you're doing. I know you so well that I know this is what you're doing. And
Maybe
I'm like worried about
in
you.
our parenting, because you would be like, okay, children, I see what you're trying to do. And my kids are older, so I would look at them and be like, what the fuck are you doing?
Well, and I mean, maybe that's just our difference in personality too, right? Like,
sure.
You know,
you're a little bit more calm than I am
sometimes. Maybe how do you read that conversation? Do you read Victor as more like, I'm worried about you, I see what you're doing, or more like, what is wrong with you?
I think I see it somewhere in the middle. Like, I feel like he's being very...
No,
like,
you have to pick one of us.
Well, here's
Who's right?
I can't do that. No, I think I see it more as a fatherly, like stern, but not aggressive. So like when your kid's in trouble and you're giving him a stern talking to, he wants to get his point across. So he's not going to be all lovey-dovey about it, but he's also not being aggressive about it.
Yeah, like passionate, but not aggressive.
Right.
Yeah. I thought that I really liked what he said to her. Whether you take these unnecessary risks on purpose or not, regardless of if you're afraid or not, the end result will not change. And ultimately, that's true, right? Because fate is involved in her life in a huge way that she doesn't know.
She does ascend, just not in the way that the Blood Queen thinks she will.
Exactly.
Here's the thing that kind of took me off guard, because he says, because no matter what you do, you're not going to be found unworthy. You will ascend. So how is he so certain about that? Does he know more than we think he knows?
Well, I think it's like any parent where you're like, this is happening whether or not you want it to.
I think, too, that it's possible that we learn in Book 4, War of Two Queens, that victors, these people that are on Earth for this one purpose to help this one person, right? It's possible that they know that they are victors while they're alive.
I think it says that some of them know and some of them do not.
Right. And Victor himself has been a victor multiple times. He's the original one. He's been reincarnated who knows how many times over the centuries. And I think it's possible that he knows his role in her life, and that he knows if he is a victor, she has a huge purpose. Right. So maybe he's making an assumption based on that. You know?
I was just curious because, I mean, he was very certain and very, this is going to happen.
Yeah, I think if he knows anything more then face value, it would be like, I know that I'm a victor, therefore you're going to do something big, because he very clearly loves her and cares about her and wants good for her, right?
Well, and he puts his own ass on the line by training her and
yeah.
taking her out into the city to help the cursed. And so he knows he's getting her ready for something.
Right.
Because his excuses for doing those things are not good excuses.
No, they're not.
Like the training one, he's like, well, I know you don't want to feel helpless like your parents did. And then for the cursed one, he's like, well, you're going to go anyway, which is true.
Yeah. Right.
But also, like, he could fix what are the trees called? Jacarandas.
Jacaranda. Yeah.
Yes.
That's the only. That is literally the only reason I know.
Jacintas or something.
No, I did too.
And so he easily could have had that fixed because he's allowed to leave that area. He could just go out the front gates and do this work.
Right. No, that's exactly right. But I don't think there's any world where he knows anything about the Blood Queen and what her actual plan for Poppy is. That would hurt my feelings. I refuse it. No, I rebuke that.
Well, if he knows, I mean, he's very obviously trying to push her away from that.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Before we move on to Lord Mazeen and his horribleness.
I like to call him motherfucking Lord Mazeen.
So when it talked about the Wisher's Grove, I was like, oh, I feel like that's important. And so, like I said, I looked it up on my Kindle, and it is only mentioned this one time in this book. And so I was going to do a deep dive on Wisher's Grove. And then I was like, well, this is it. So that's not going to work. So then I thought, well, I'll just do a deep dive on like some haunted places around our city. And that led me to this lady. I'm really excited about this because I've never heard of this lady, and I feel like there's a lot of parallels between her and Poppy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Jenny Casseday, the person who lived here in Louisville, where we are all living, and also a haunted place that is Jenny Casseday's free infirmary for women. So
I've not heard this story.
I know. I had never heard of it before. I'm really excited about this. So Jenny Casseday was born in 1840 and into a very wealthy Christian home here in Louisville, Kentucky. Her family owned slaves. Eventually, they freed all of their slaves and paid for them all to be sent to Liberia in Africa. When she was 21, she was in a really horrible carriage accident where basically the horses went out of control, the carriage overturned, and she was dragged under the wheels of the carriage and had a permanent spinal injury that left her physically disabled, bedridden, and in pain for the rest of her life. And before this accident, and also after the accident, but especially before, she and her mother shared a love of flowers, and they had this really beautiful like garden, and they had this wall up the side of their property. It was either a wall of the house or like a wall on the property, but it had all these different types of flowers and plants that they really took a lot of pride in and got a lot of joy out of. And that's going to be important a little bit later. Because she always had that love of flowers, she was inspired by a story that she heard of a teacher in Roxbury, Massachusetts, who was giving out flowers as basically like a ministry to the poor and disenfranchised to kind of like brighten their day. This woman in Roxbury, Massachusetts, saw that all these wealthy people had these humongous gardens that were gorgeous and nobody was doing anything with them. And she thought that's kind of a waste of all of these plants. So she would get these flowers, I guess, when they were like gonna die or when they were picked, whatever, and she was just giving them away to people. So Jenny Casseday thought, I love flowers. I'm bedridden. This would be something that would really brighten my life, and I bet other people feel that way too. So she started a flower mission here in Louisville where she like wrote letters to her kind of high society friends. They came to her bedroom because she's bedridden, remember, and she created this whole organization that made bouquets of flowers and handwritten notes and potted plants and sent it to like orphanages and hospitals and prisons and people and shut-ins like her, right? Which I thought was really cool. She founded the Louisville Training School for Nurses. She founded the Order of King's Daughters here in Louisville, which is an organization, I think it's a religious organization that started in New York City, but it was basically an organization for like social reform to help people, kind of. she started working for the Women's Christian Temperance Movement, who heard about her flower mission and said, we're a big organization and we want to partner with you. Can you be like the superintendent of a flower mission in our organization? So 15 years after she started working with the Women's Christian Temperance Movement, her flower mission department had distributed over 1.5 million bouquets of flowers, over 34,000 growing plants, 403,000 text cards, over 1.3 million pages of flower mission literature, 38,000 tumblers/jars of jelly and preserves, which I loved, almost 16,000 bushels of produce, 134,000 articles of clothing, 317,000 visits to the poor and the sick, 14,000 visits to public institutions, and 19,500 drives or outings for children, invalids, and other worthy people.
And I want to point out, this was before telephone, internet,
Exactly.
social media. So how, like, it's just crazy that the word got out like
she's
that.
bedridden.
Yeah.
So like
Right.
everyone has to come to her and then go out and do all the things. Like she can't even go oversee these ideas that she has, right? I just thought this was like so crazy to me. I thought it was really cool. The Order of was it called? The Order of King's Daughters. So she established the Louisville chapter of this, and then that organization founded the Jenny Casseday Infirmary for women, which was basically a hospital or healthcare for lower class and lower income ladies of Louisville, who at that time were struggling with poverty, poor sanitation, tuberculosis, cholera, and eventually the 1918 flu epidemic. Louisville apparently was known as the graveyard of the West because of all these healthcare issues. So she was providing, I'm assuming, free healthcare for specifically women and children. One thing that I really loved about Jenny Casseday is that she had a diary, and on the first page it had an inscription, "Count your blessings one by one." And she wrote, "I cannot. They rush upon me like waters from a gargoyle," which I just really, really loved. Like this woman who's bedridden and like, you know, paralyzed for her entire life from age 21 had such a positive attitude and perspective and like used her struggle to help other people, which I just thought was fantastic. That brings me to the haunted part. So the infirmary that was the Jenny Casseday Infirmary is downtown, or was located downtown on 6th Street. Dozens of women ended up dying there of various causes, but a lot of women died in the maternity ward, which makes sense for that time period. The building later became the unisex Louisville Neuropathic Sanatorium and is now an apartment building.
A sanatorium's like an insane asylum, right?
I don't know if it was like, I think sometimes they use sanatorium for like tuberculosis, like Waverly Hills
Was a sanatorium.
Yeah, but
that's
it
right.
was a tuberculosis thing.
Well, and I do wonder too, because if we talk about socioeconomic impact of people and the need
Right.
for health care, a lot of women around this time were put in these like institutions for either getting divorced or being emotional, or you know what I mean? And honestly, knowing kind of her background for doing these things, I do wonder if there was a little bit of that in there
Yeah,
too.
I mean,
Right.
I read a book about something totally extra. It was about ghosts, based on a haunting in Santa Fe. But the woman was overseas, and they were putting her in a sanatorium, or it was because she had endometriosis. Like it was a way
Right.
to
well, her lady parts hurt, so she must be evil.
Exactly. It was like a way to say, well, you know, it's like they don't know,
or it's
because they were all male doctors.
It's
you know?
caused by hysteria,
Right.
probably. Yeah. So this building is, as far as I could tell, is still like there and standing downtown. One room in this building was the site of 3 separate exorcisms. Because of the hauntings, which I thought was really, really interesting. So allegedly one of the rooms is haunted by the spirit of a woman who died by suicide in that room. And there was really one consistent story that I saw about this place and why people think that it's haunted. So basically the story is that there was an older man who was a veteran of, I think, World War II, and he was living in what used to be the infirmary's maternity ward, because it was a room away from the others in a quieter part of the building. So his living room is supposed to be the site where there were a couple of different maternity ward beds where multiple people, ended up passing away in the maternity ward. So these specific beds were reserved for women undergoing a labor gone bad. So it was often a place where women in a difficult labor suffered and died. This is his living room. So in his living room, he had a radio and a lamp in these spots where these beds are supposed to have been. So paranormal activity, by the way, this is all from hauntedhouses.com. Paranormal activity began slowly and built up in intensity. He went to a priest and asked him to come bless the apartment, and that didn't work. And so the priest came back to do a full-blown exorcism, which really got the joint jumping, paranormally speaking, is what the website says, which I thought was hilarious.
What it makes me want, like in a lot of paranatural lore, this means that a spirit's getting angry, which goes back to the whole what was actually happening there type of mentality. Like, what were they doing to women in this area for a spirit to be that mad?
Right. So what this guy was experiencing was the radio was turning on and off by itself, or changing the volume by itself. The lamp was turning on and off by itself. And when the blessing happened, that activity did not stop and increased and got worse. He began hearing not just the radio turning on and off, but he began hearing long, mournful moans, which began softly and grew in intensity, ending in sobs. As time went on, those moans turned into screaming and pleading. The lamp and the radio in his living room began to float in midair while the hysterical
fucking terrifying.
Right? While the hysterical screaming of women in pain filled the apartment. A force came over him that made it hard for him to breathe. Felt like he was being choked with like invisible hands.
Again, what was happening in this room?
Right? Where he watched the dial. He had unplugged the radio to try to get it to like stop doing that. He watched the dial on the unplugged radio spin and the floor lamp rotate. He felt the temperature in the room drop sharply. Water droplets dripped from behind. Water droplets formed on the wall behind the radio and the lamp, and a foggy mist filled the living room, and it began to rain inside his living room. So that's when he went back to the priest and was like, please exorcise this room. The priest told this man that over the years he had performed the holy rite of exorcism in this exact room twice before. So this was his third exorcism.
So maybe you hire someone else.
I know, right?
I
thought that too. I thought that too. Like,
this isn't a third time.
Right. Third time's the charm.
Does this dude have a monopoly on exorcisms or something?
I guess he's just like the leader of the parish or whatever.
So there is some really fascinating information about exorcism in the Catholic Church, where it has to be a very, very, very extreme case, and you do have to have very specific training. So I bet he probably was the only person that was qualified to do exorcisms here.
So during the exorcism, the cross flew across the room, the floor and the walls shook, the dial on the radio went crazy, room lights flickered, mist formed, a big ball of light appeared, and the pleading screams of 3 women grew in intensity. 3 female apparitions appeared. The young man realized that they seemed to want to know something from him, and then he basically determined if this was a maternity ward and these are mothers that died in childbirth, they're probably just worried about their kids. So he said that he told them that their children were fine, and the suffering entities left the apartment, finally free of their torment. And allegedly, there was never any other like paranormal. He lived there for a couple more years and didn't have anything weird happen.
I would never have stayed there. Yeah,
that is exactly. Yeah, I was like,
the lamp levitated, I would have been like, I'm out. I'm breaking my lease. I'm sorry.
Done. Yeah, I thought that exact same thing of like, nah. He lived there peacefully for 2 more years. I'm like, no.
It only takes one unpeaceful instance for me to not.
I wouldn't even go back with the priest to do the exorcism. Right. You know what I mean? Like, you're on your own, kid. Like, I'm not doing that. I just thought that was really cool because I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that place.
Not a story I've heard.
I've never heard of this lady. And, of course, it's the late 1800s. So there's a lot of problematic stuff when you look at this woman's life. I looked her up on Wikipedia. I really recommend it. It was a really cool story to read about. Especially, I felt like there were a lot of parallels with Poppy of like, you know, you're born into a certain type of privilege, but you still have a hard life, right? For one reason or another. And instead of just wallowing in the grief of your struggle, you turn it around and try to help other people with what you can. You know, you do what you can do to help other people. And I just felt like there were so many parallels to Poppy helping the cursed in that. And I thought it was a really cool story. So that is Jenny Casseday. So the last part of this section of reading is her Poppy with Lord Mazeen. And we already know he is like the Duke's right-hand man and that he is a part of her punishments. And he basically is just a giant creeper that corners her, gets her alone in like a closet and like puts his dick up on her. Basically, because at one point she says she feels his erection.
What you do to me, kind of
and
thing.
he like tells her that he missed her and all. And I'm like, you are nasty.
He is so gross.
And I picture him as like a really gross, oily, like hair slicked back guy. But it sounds like he's supposed to actually be really good looking. Which
yes,
yeah.
But there is a part in this that. Because she has talked several times about the Duke's punishments, and you don't really know what that is. And you really don't know what it is yet here. But there is a moment where she talks about one time she essentially smarted off to the Duke, and he hits her so hard that she was knocked out long enough for them to drink an entire bottle of whiskey.
Yep.
And that she has a concussion.
Which, you know, we were talking about how the punishments are sexual. The way that it was described where she woke up and they were sitting like lounging on the couch.
It makes me wonder what they did to her.
Yeah, it makes me think that they violated her in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, he is so... this whole male superiority complex, right? He's so convinced that he can do whatever he wants. He takes her from her guard into an alcove where they have like a chaise lounge, which I've never had one of those in an alcove ever. And I don't know why these are there. I don't, maybe it's for feeding.
That's what I thought too.
But he takes her in there, rubs his dick on her, and then you hear someone screaming.
Well, and right when the scream happens, she says that she feels something like wet up on her jaw. So I think
he licked her.
I think he's like licking her.
Well, you know how I feel about licking the face.
Right. Well,
if it's not Rhysand, don't lick my face.
He's like he's holding onto her from behind her so that she can't go anywhere. Yeah. She feels his erection up against her behind her.
And
he's
he brags
licking.
About it. He's
like he's licking her face. Like he is so gross.
And she makes a comment in here about Lord Mazeen not even being the worst example.
I wrote that down too. Like he isn't even the worst. And I was like, he's not? Like, really?
What I thought was very telling too, that I had totally forgotten, was why he started all this in the first place, because there was some sort of card game and Ian beat him and he said he cheated and so Poppy laughed. And that is
so stupid.
It's the dumbest reason ever.
So what I find fascinating about this is throughout this series you learn that the gods went to sleep because they started to lose their humanity from being alive for too long, which is essentially what is happening with the Ascended here. Like he's been alive for so long.
Yeah, that's true.
And he's had no consequences.
Yep.
And so he just does whatever he wants.
Yeah. And he's allowed to get away with it, right? Like he's besties with the Duke, who's the highest authority in this town, right? So like if the Duke's not going to do anything, why worry about anything that you do at all?
I love how she seriously considers cutting his dick off.
I love that. I really did. I really did love that.
Somebody screamed, "I can't cut your dick off."
Well, and this is the first example, this and the conversation with Victor, where Victor's talking about, like, I know what the Duke does to you. And this becomes kind of a theme that Poppy has to deal with throughout the books of like, there were these guards that I had that were in charge of protecting me and that definitely loved me. And definitely, especially Victor, like he wanted to do what was best for me, but like they let this stuff happen and she kind of has to reconcile that. And this is just one example, right? Like you said, Deb, Lord Mazeen takes her away from her guard and he just stands there and lets it happen.
Well, there's even an example within these 2 chapters that we've read where Victor tells her, I know I've had to help you back to your room. And even Castile later says, and everyone just thought that was okay. Like
right.
No one. Yeah. And it's this fear that they put over them. Like the gods are going to see you as unworthy. And essentially we will fuck you up if you mess with us. So can we talk a little bit about what she sees in this room from Lord Mazeen? Because even though he was putting his dick up on her. Like, this woman that she finds after they hear the screams is partially nude. Mm-hmm. And I had forgotten this. So it says she was lying on an ivory-colored settee, her pale blue gown wrinkled and bunched around her waist.
Yep.
One arm dangled limply off the side, her skin the shade of chalk. I didn't have to open my senses to know that she felt no pain. And it talks about how her neck was twisted in an unnatural angle. So I'm like, so you screwed her after you killed her? That's what it sounds like to
Or
me.
he killed her while he was...
Right.
Yeah. I think he was definitely raping her. Because she says, you know, even the servants are like, stay away from this guy. Because she says he knows with me he has to stop at a certain point, but he doesn't have that boundary line with anybody else.
But here's the thing, and here's the thing for anyone who thinks this behavior is okay. There is someone who will be attracted to you. There is someone that will say yes. Like, just be a kind person. But I think what we have to remember is people like Lord Mazeen and the Duke get off on this, unfortunately.
It's about power and control.
Right. And so, but there are ways that you can be powerful that don't hurt people.
Right. But like you said, they've been alive for so long and, you know, they may or may not have souls. They may or may not be kind of demons and corrupted souls. Like, they just genuinely do not care. They do not care about anybody but themselves. And I wonder if that kind of animalistic survival instinct that she talks about with the Craven is kind of connected, or like the other side of the same coin of this, like, I'm only going to think about myself. Like, I don't have any kind of empathy or compassion or concern for other people. It's just about me.
Well, we talked about in the last episode how we're not sure if they have souls or emotions, but we know that they have reactions, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're feeling lust and you're feeling hungry, you can have some very animalistic reactions to those things. Even us as humans have reactions to those things. And so I think that they get to a point where they just take what they want because there's no consequences. And if they don't feel sad about it, then why wouldn't they just take what they want?
Yeah. It reminds me of that Supernatural episode I just watched with Abaddon is harvesting souls to create like a soulless army of people. And they're all just like, well, you know, Sam talks to one of them like, why did you do this? And it's like, because I could. Because I wanted to. And like, it's that same kind of thinking.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So it's really going to start hitting the fan at this point.
You know, because it hasn't already.
Because it hasn't already, yeah. Should we do our nerdiest things of the week?
Oh, yeah. You want to go first, Whit?
I feel like I haven't had a super nerdy time. I haven't even really like been able to read, which is a big bummer. But I don't think we ever talked about, Deb, you and I ordered the Blood and Ash overlays from Reading Portal, which are by Dominique Wesson, and they're so good. I cannot wait. I don't even know when they're supposed to even like ship.
I think March.
Well, okay. Well, that's not too long. I was thinking maybe it was like December. I don't even know, but we ordered them and they're going to go in my book, and I'm really excited about that. That's pretty much my only nerdy thing that I have going on.
So mine was also bookish this week, where I designed a bunch of embroidered sweatshirts with like the joined names of bookish couples, right? Like Poppy Cass or Cass
like
Poppy.
cool.
Yeah, and then like
cool.
the like my favorite quote, like embroidered on the sleeve too. So I'm going to drop that in my shop this week. So by the time this is released, they'll already be out. But I got really excited about it and motivated. And so I spent a lot of time with my teenage daughter going, okay, what would you call this ship?
Yeah.
And I will tell you the nerdiest thing is I'm going back and forth as to whether or not I want to do an Elaine Asriel and a Gwen Asriel one, because I don't want people coming at me.
Yeah.
That is a very
Maybe
touchy
I have
subject.
to do both or neither.
Yeah. And do you need an Eris and Asriel for those shippers too?
Well, now
we need Tamlin and Lucian.
Right.
I know,
John
right?
Judy posted this week the Tamlin and Lucian one, and I wrote on there from one of our podcast episodes. I was like, well, we say he only called out for Lucian under the mountain, right?
That's true. That's funny. Yeah. What about you, Min?
Mine, I guess, is somewhat bookish as well. It is a book of sorts. So for my birthday, you know when you have a birthday that you get all kinds of coupons from every shop you've ever bought from? And so I got a coupon for like $10 off from one of my favorite shops. It's called alwaysfits.com. They just have really cool, retro, fun things, mostly from the 80s and 90s. Just, Golden Girl shit and, I don't know, just fun stuff from the 80s. But they had it was called Mad Libs After Dark. So I bought this. I haven't really looked at it. I saved it for tonight. I thought we could do one.
Ooh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, let's.
This is the first one I opened too. Okay, so I need a person in the room.
Let's do Robbie.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then I need a person in the room. I don't know. No, it needs to be a different person.
Whitney.
Right.
I'm afraid that
I was
one
going
of
to
us
say,
will end up with Robbie.
please don't put anybody else. Adjective,
Horny.
plural noun.
Balls.
A place,
The floor.
Oh.
adverb.
Lustily. That's a word, right?
Sure.
Sure, yeah. Adjective,
Brazen.
Ooh. You're coming up with good ones.
noun,
Penis. I read Katie Roberts today. That's why.
adjective,
Busty.
There we go.
plural part of the body.
Oh, I should
Toes.
use balls for that.
Toes. Okay. Celebrity.
Ethan Hawke.
Oh, I was going to
Oh,
say
go ahead.
Pedro Pascal.
No, Pedro Pascal. Do Pedro Pascal.
Noun,
Daddy.
If you could see Whitney's facial expressions.
color,
Teal.
part of the body, plural.
Boobs.
Part of the body,
Eyes.
number,
12.
Sounds good.
adjective,
Dark.
noun,
Couch. Sorry, Mindy. I'm talking over
I'm
you.
blanking.
type of food,
Ooh, burrito.
different type of food.
Taco. What's coming out of your Speedo? Do you guys remember that on SNL? Taco, burrito, what's coming out of your Speedo? It was Sherry O'Terry and Will
The cheerleaders.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 adjectives, and then that's the end.
Harry.
Sexy.
All right, Red Hot Reed voice, please.
Okay, this is called glamming it up. Robbie had been looking forward to her first date with Whitney all week. He was a horny catch. He had his own business importing rare fossilized balls from remote locations in the floor. He had to be lustily successful because he drove a brazen sports car and lived in a huge brick penis in an upscale, busty neighborhood. To top it off, his toes were as finely chiseled as Pedro Pascal's. She grabbed her favorite low-cut daddy from the closet. It really brought out the teal in her boobs. Even better, it accented her ample eyes. She grabbed a pair of 12-inch stiletto pumps and accessorized the outfit with a simple dark pendant and an oversized pair of couch-shaped earrings. I bet somebody sells that from Friends.
Oh, 100%.
To make sure she got all his senses tingling, she sprayed on her best burrito-scented perfume and used some taco-flavored breath freshener.
That would get me going.
Yeah. You're as hairy as you'll ever be, she thought. Now get out there and knock him sexy.
That's awesome.
That was a good one.
I like the rare fossilized balls, I think is my favorite.
Mindy, we're going to use this at the Imaginarium Book Festival, right?
Yes.
So part of our panels is they're not regular panels. There's like these really fun questions they have to draw out of a bowl. And the creators of the book festival asked us to also bring some ideas. So I think we're going to do a Mad Libs every panel,
I
which
like
there's
it.
4. That'll
Yeah.
be really fun.
That'll be fun. Well, that's it. So next week, we're going to talk about chapters 6 and 7.
Bye.
Bye.